In Alaska, winter could swallow a man whole. The rivers froze, the game vanished, and the nearest store was 100 miles of snow away. Yet the homesteaders never starved. How did they do it? In today's video, we'll uncover 20 foods Alaskan homesteaders stockpile that never expire, the secrets that kept them alive through endless ice. The sound came first, a sharp crack as teeth met something harder than stone. To most, it was just a biscuit. To Alaskan homesteaders, it was survival itself. Hardtack, known in the north as pilot bread, was the food that refused to die. When the first settlers arrived, they needed something that could endure ocean voyages, frozen trails, and long winters without molding or breaking down. Hardtack answered that call. Made from nothing more than flour, salt, and water, it was baked until every trace of moisture vanished. That dryness was its secret. With no water to feed bacteria, it could last for decades if kept sealed and dry. Homesteaders carried stacks of it on sleds and boats, dipped it in coffee, crumbled it into soup, or spread it with seal oil or jam. It wasn't soft and it wasn't sweet, but it never failed them. In a world where everything froze, it stayed loyal. Even now, pilot bread remains an Alaskan staple, sold in every village store and carried on hunting trips. It tastes like history, simple, strong, and unyielding. But not every food needed the oven. Some were born from the land itself, preserved by wind, sun, and instinct. Out in the wild when the snow never stopped falling, one food carried Alaskans through the silence of winter: pemmican. It was more than a meal. It was survival packed into a handful. Homesteaders learned the craft from indigenous hunters. They dried strips of caribou or moose until they were light and crisp, then ground them into powder. Melted fat was mixed in, sometimes with wild berries for sweetness, and pressed into solid cakes. That blend of meat, fat, and fruit could last for years. Its secret was balance. No moisture, no spoilage, only pure energy sealed by fat. A few bites could fuel a day's work in freezing weather. Pemmican didn't freeze, didn't rot, and didn't waste space. It became the lifeline of trappers, explorers, and anyone who dared live beyond the edge of the road. Even today, its story continues. Modern Alaskans still make it, not just for tradition, but for what it teaches. That simplicity can outlast the hardest winters. And when meat met the wind instead of the fire, another Alaskan favorite was born, thin and red like sunlight breaking through the snow. Picture a row of drying racks standing in the cold wind, the smell of salt and smoke hanging in the air. This was the heartbeat of every Alaskan summer. Sun-dried salmon strips. Families lined the rivers, slicing fresh salmon into long, thin cuts and hanging them in the open air. The Arctic sun did the rest. Day after day, it pulled away the moisture, leaving behind rich red strips that would last through winter. No chemicals, no jars, just patience and wind. The secret was simple: remove the water, and life could not spoil it. The meat stayed pure, the oils locked inside. When the rivers froze, those strips became a treasure. Have you ever bitten into dried salmon, still smoky from the last fire? It's chewy, salty, and alive with history. For Alaskan families, it wasn't just food, it was a promise that even when the world froze, they would not go hungry. But some fish were not dried in the sun. They were given to the smoke, slow, steady, and cold, creating a flavor that became legend. The king of fish needed no crown. It had smoke. In Alaskan smokehouses, king salmon hung from wooden rafters while thin streams of alder smoke curled around it. The fire burned low, never hot enough to cook. The smoke did the work, drawing out moisture, sealing in oil, and wrapping each fillet in a scent that lasted for months. Cold smoking was more than preservation. It was art. The temperature stayed low, around 40 degrees, letting the smoke dry the fish slowly while the air cured it from within. The secret was patience. Days of gentle smoke and still air turned soft fish into firm, golden perfection. Every family had its own touch. Some used birch for sweetness, others added saltwater brine or spruce tips for flavor. The result was the same: salmon that stayed rich, safe, and edible through the longest dark. Close your eyes and imagine it: the glimmer of oil, the scent of wood, the taste of survival. Cold smoked king salmon wasn't just food, it was pride. It was Alaska's fire inside the frost. And where fire met metal, another form of preservation would soon rise. One that sealed life inside a tin can. Deep in the Alaskan wilderness, hunting season was more than tradition, it was preparation. When a moose was taken, every cut mattered. Nothing could be wasted, not in a land where winter could last half the year. That is why homesteaders turned to pressure canning. Large jars filled with chunks of moose meat simmered slowly inside heavy metal canners. The heat reached far higher than boiling water, sealing the jars tight and killing every trace of bacteria. It wasn't luck that kept the meat fresh. It was science learned through hardship. The pressure locked the flavor inside while keeping decay out. Once cooled, those jars could sit for years in a cellar without spoiling. Families opened them in February when the snow buried the doorways and the rivers turned to stone. The meat was tender, rich, and ready for stew, even when the world outside was frozen silent. If you've ever opened a jar of pressure-canned moose, the scent fills the room with warmth and memory. It is the taste of patience, the reward of work done right. But not every meal came from jars. Some were shaped by wind and air, dried by the Arctic itself. Along the riverbanks, wooden racks stood in rows against the endless sky. Strips of whitefish hung in silence, turning slowly in the cold northern air. No smoke, no salt, only wind and time. This was the oldest preservation method in Alaska, and perhaps the purest. The process began right after the catch. The fish were cleaned, filleted, and hung in a place where the breeze stayed constant and insects could not reach. The dry air pulled the moisture out slowly, leaving the flesh firm and light. When done right, the fish could last for months. The secret was timing. Too much heat, and the fish spoiled. Too much cold, and it froze before drying. Only patience made it perfect. Homesteaders checked the racks daily, turning each strip until it reached that fine balance between crispness and strength. Dried whitefish became trail food, easy to carry, impossible to waste. A single piece could fuel a man through miles of snow. Even today, many Alaskan families still dry their fish the same way, just as their grandparents did. The air gave them food without fire, but the sea offered something different, preserved in salt and shaped by the tide. At low tide, the smell of the sea filled the air, sharp and clean. Fishermen hauled in nets heavy with herring, silver flashing in the pale light. These small fish didn't last long fresh, but the ocean itself taught the cure: salt. The herring were split, cleaned, and packed into barrels layered with coarse sea salt. Within hours, the salt began to draw out moisture, soaking the fish in its own brine. The secret was balance, not too little, not too much. Enough to preserve, enough to keep flavor alive. Weeks later, the fish were firm, dark, and ready to eat. They could be rinsed and cooked in stew or eaten cold on hard bread. The taste was strong, a mix of sea and thyme. But it kept hunger away when nothing else would. Salt-cured herring became a lifeline along Alaska's coasts, traded, stored, and shared between families. It carried the ocean into the deep winter, a promise of sustenance even when storms raged outside. If you close your eyes, you can almost smell the salt and feel the chill wind off the water. It was a simple method, but it fed generations. Then came the smokehouse, where both land and sea met fire. Imagine the smell of alder smoke drifting through a cold Alaskan valley. A line of wooden racks stands outside a small cabin, each one holding thin strips of dark red meat. This is moose jerky, one of the oldest survival foods in the north. After a hunt, nothing went to waste. The meat was sliced thin, salted, and hung above a slow fire. The smoke curled around it for days, drying it until the strips became tough and rich with flavor. Have you ever wondered how something so simple could last so long? The secret was in the dryness. No moisture meant no rot. Smoke added another layer of protection, keeping away insects and sealing the meat with its deep, savory taste. Jerky was easy to pack and light to carry, perfect for long trips through frozen wilderness. It could last for months without spoiling, even longer when kept cold. While the cowboys of the frontier had beef jerky in Alaska, moose ruled the rack. If you've ever bitten into smoked jerky, you know the taste: earthy, salty, and alive with fire. It was more than food, it was endurance in every chew. But for those who lived by the sea, another treasure was waiting inside a glass jar. The rivers of Alaska were silver highways filled with salmon, strong enough to feed a village. When the catch came in, families worked fast. They filleted the fish, packed the pink meat into jars, and set them inside heavy canners that hissed with steam. This was pressure canned salmon, a food that could outlast the winter. Under high heat, the jars sealed tight, locking in the flavor and killing anything that could cause spoilage. The secret was pressure. It forced heat deep into every piece of fish, preserving it without the need for freezing. Have you ever opened a jar of home-canned salmon in midwinter? The scent of summer rivers returns. The color glows softly through the glass, proof that care and patience can hold back time. Families stacked their jars in cool pantries, 100 meals waiting in silence. When storms cut off supply boats, these jars became gold. A spoonful stirred into rice or soup could bring warmth to the darkest months. It was a simple act of survival, but also a kind of faith. The belief that preparation today would feed tomorrow. Yet not all Alaskan food came from meat or fish. Some treasures came from what melted beside the fire. When the hunt was done and the meat stored away, the real work began. In the warmth of the cabin, a heavy pot simmered over the fire. Inside, thick pieces of moose fat slowly melted down into something precious: tallow. Nothing was wasted on the homestead. Every bit of fat held value. As it melted, the liquid turned golden, clear, and clean. Once cooled, it hardened into a smooth, pale block that could last for years without spoiling. The secret was purity. By heating it gently, every trace of moisture was burned away, leaving behind only stable fat the time could not touch. Have you ever smelled tallow melting? It's rich, earthy, and comforting. Homesteaders used it for cooking, greasing tools, waterproofing boots, even making candles. It burned bright and clean, a small miracle in a land where everything froze. Tallow was more than food. It was life made useful in every form. A spoonful could fry fish, a handful could heal cracked hands. It carried warmth through the coldest nights. The Alaskans knew that survival wasn't just about eating. It was about using every gift the land gave. And when fat turned to flame, another story of endurance was born. The Arctic wind never stopped blowing. Food froze solid within minutes, but one thing stayed liquid through it all: seal oil. For generations, it was the heart of northern survival. Hunters rendered it carefully from seal blubber, warming it slowly until it turned clear and golden. Stored in skin bags or glass jars, it kept for years without spoiling. The secret was in its purity. No water meant no decay. Even in the coldest temperatures, it stayed smooth and rich, a source of energy and warmth when the body needed it most. Have you ever tried to imagine life without cooking oil or butter? Deep in the Arctic, seal oil was both. It flavored dried fish, softened bread, and fueled lamps that burned through the long, dark winter. To the Inupiat and Yupik people, it was more than food. It was tradition, family, and ceremony. A taste that connected generations across ice and time. When settlers arrived, they adopted it too, learning that survival in the north required listening to those who already knew its rhythm. Would you have trusted that golden liquid from the sea to keep you alive through the dark? The homesteaders did, and sometimes their strength came from the giants of the ocean itself. In the frozen Arctic, warmth often came from what lived in the sea. Muktuk, made from whale skin and blubber, was one of Alaska's oldest survival foods. It was both nourishment and heritage. After a successful hunt, families cut thick slabs from the whale's hide. The outer skin was smooth and rubbery, the blubber rich and pale beneath. It was eaten raw, boiled, or frozen, each bite dense with energy. The secret was in the fat, nature's perfect preservative. The cold hardened it, but never spoiled it, locking in nutrients and calories that could sustain life through months of darkness. Have you ever wondered what courage it took to eat something so pure, so untouched? Muktuk wasn't a delicacy. It was endurance. It warmed the body from within, keeping hunters strong in temperatures that froze the air they breathed. To Alaska's indigenous peoples, it was sacred. Every piece honored the whale, every meal a reminder of respect between the sea and its people. Even today, muktuk remains part of feasts and celebrations, linking past and present. From the depths of the ocean came life, but sometimes it appeared in delicate form, floating gently on kelp, shimmering with promise. In spring, when the ice melted and the sea came alive again, a remarkable sight appeared along Alaska's coast. Long ribbons of kelp drifted in the tide, covered in tiny, shimmering pearls of herring eggs. This was herring spawn, a gift from the sea and a feast for those who knew where to find it. Families waded into the cold shallows to gather it by hand. The kelp was spread to dry in the coastal wind until it turned crisp and pale. The secret was simplicity. The salt of the sea preserved it, while the cold air drew out every drop of moisture. Once dried, it could last for years without losing its taste or texture. Have you ever seen something so fragile hold the weight of survival? Each bite was rich in oil and protein, a burst of the ocean's life. For coastal communities, it was more than food. It marked the return of spring, the renewal of the sea, and the start of another season of hope. Even now, dried herring spawn on kelp is shared at festivals and gatherings, a tradition that refuses to fade. And when the ocean rested, the land offered its own treasures, waiting in cold storage beneath the soil. When the northern winds began to howl and daylight faded to a few brief hours, warmth was worth more than gold. The Alaskans found it in rendered caribou fat, a gift that could feed, heal, and endure. After a successful hunt, every part of the caribou mattered. Hunters gathered the thick fat and melted it slowly over the fire. As it liquefied, it turned golden and clear, leaving behind a clean, pure tallow that could last for years without spoiling. The secret was simple. Heat removed every trace of moisture, and purity kept it safe from decay. Have you ever felt that kind of comfort? The smell of warmth after cold days on the trail. Rendered fat carried that feeling. It was poured into jars, packed into skin bags, and used for everything from frying meat to waterproofing boots. Families even mixed it with berries to make high-energy trail food, rich enough to keep them moving through blizzards and endless night. To this day, hunters still make it, knowing the old truth remains. Fat is not waste, it is strength. And while the fat sustained them, the rivers provided another miracle: tiny eggs that held the power of an ocean. Along the Alaskan rivers, spring brought life in its smallest form. Fish returned to spawn, and with them came a delicacy that could outlast the seasons: dried fish roe. Homesteaders and indigenous families collected the delicate eggs from salmon or herring, spreading them thin across cedar racks or flat stones. The Arctic air did the rest, drying them gently under cool sunlight. The secret to their longevity was in their size. Each tiny egg held natural oils that sealed it from air and decay once dried. Have you ever seen sunlight catch on fish eggs, turning them to gold? To Alaskans, that shimmer meant survival. A handful of roe offered protein, fat, and energy enough to endure long days on the ice. The taste was unlike anything else. Salty, crisp, a burst of the sea itself. Dried roe could be eaten plain, crumbled into stews, or ground into powder to flavor other dishes. For generations, it has remained a staple, proof that even the smallest things can sustain great strength. And where rivers met tundra, another tradition smoked in the cold air, a food that carried the wild scent of the hunt itself. The smokehouse stood at the edge of the forest, the air thick with the scent of alder wood. Inside hung strips of dark meat, drying slowly in the cold. This was smoked caribou jerky, one of Alaska's oldest and most reliable foods. Caribou meat was sliced thin, rubbed with salt, and hung above a small, steady fire. The smoke rose and curled for days, pulling out moisture and sealing in flavor. The secret was patience. No rush, no flames, just time and air working together until the meat turned firm and dry. Have you ever stood near a smoking fire and felt the comfort of its warmth? That was what this food gave. Each bite was smoky, rich, and slightly sweet, the taste of wilderness preserved by human hands. Jerky was more than trail food. It was independence. Hunters carried it deep into the backcountry, knowing it would never spoil. A few pieces could keep a person moving through snowstorms and silence. Today, smoked caribou jerky still hangs in Alaskan smokehouses made with the same patience as centuries ago. It is the flavor of survival, fire, wind, and endurance combined. But even beyond meat and smoke, Alaska offered sweetness hidden in the trees themselves. When spring finally broke through the frost, the forests came alive with a sharp, citrus scent. That smell came from spruce tips, the soft green shoots that pushed from the trees after months of cold. To Alaskans, those tips meant renewal, and from them came one of the most treasured northern sweets, spruce tip syrup. Homesteaders gathered the young tips by hand, grinding them and soaking them in hot water before slowly mixing in sugar. The syrup thickened, turning deep amber, full of flavor that tasted like pine and honey combined. The secret to its long life was balance. The sugar drew out moisture and sealed it, keeping the syrup safe from time and decay. Have you ever tasted the forest itself? Spruce tip syrup was like drinking spring. A few drops brightened tea, pancakes, or biscuits on long winter mornings. It was medicine filled with vitamin C and used to fight scurvy when fresh food was scarce. Families bottled it, stored it in cool cellars, and passed it down like gold. When the snow returned, that syrup reminded them that warmth always comes back. And from sweetness, they turned to another gift of the wild, berries that defied the freeze. Across the tundra, patches of color shone like jewels in the moss. Blueberries, crowberries, salmon berries, tiny bursts of sweetness growing in the coldest soil. Alaskans learned long ago that these wild fruits could last through the seasons if treated with care. After harvest, the berries were cleaned and laid out on racks in the open air. The northern wind dried them slowly until they turned leathery and light. The secret was patience and dryness. Without moisture, they could be stored for years without losing their flavor. Have you ever crushed a dried berry between your fingers and smelled summer again? That's what these fruits gave. The memory of warmth when everything outside was frozen white. Homesteaders mixed dried berries with fat to make trail food or boiled them into sauces and syrup. They were more than food. They were color in a colorless world, a reminder that life still grew beneath the ice. Even now, Alaskans still gather them each fall, drying them in kitchens and smokehouses just as their grandparents did. And while berries brought sweetness, the next method of preservation brought something entirely different, a taste shaped by patience, earth, and tradition. In the far north, the ground itself became the pantry. When the catch was good and the air too cold for rot, Alaskans buried their fish to let time transform it. This was fermented fish, a practice older than any written record. Fresh salmon or whitefish was cleaned, packed in barrels or skin bags, and buried underground where the soil stayed cold but not frozen. Over weeks or months, the natural bacteria slowly changed the meat, softening it and deepening its flavor. The secret was the ground's steady temperature. It preserved the fish while allowing it to ferment safely. Have you ever smelled the earth after rain? That same scent clung to this food. Rich, deep, and alive. To outsiders, it might seem strange, but to Alaska's native families, it was tradition, a bond with their ancestors who survived by the same methods. Fermented fish was eaten at festivals, shared among families, and treated with respect. It carried warmth and history through generations. Even today, in villages far from cities, some still follow this ancient rhythm, trusting the land to preserve what the sea provides. And as winter deepened, the last treasures of the harvest waited underground, safe within the frozen soil. When snow sealed the land and the rivers turned to ice, fresh food became a memory. That was why every homestead had a root cellar, dug deep into the earth to hold the last of summer's harvest, especially Alaskan potatoes. The cold soil acted as a natural refrigerator, keeping the temperature steady and the air damp. Potatoes stored there stayed firm and edible for months, sometimes until the next planting season. The secret was the earth itself. It shielded the food from frost while trapping just enough moisture to keep it alive. Have you ever stepped into a root cellar and felt the chill wrap around you, the smell of soil and stored life all around? That was the comfort of the cellar. Quiet, dark, dependable. Homesteaders piled their potatoes in straw, checked for sprouts, and took only what they needed. Each meal was proof that foresight and hard work could outlast even Alaska's long winters. And with the earth as their ally, Alaskans learned the oldest truth of survival: prepare, preserve, endure.